Introduce it first. Okay, this is an interview with John L. Reed at the New York State Military Museum, Saratoga Springs, New York, September 3rd, 2002, approximately 1:10 p.m. The interviewer is Michael Russert. Could you tell us your full name, when and where you were born?
My name is John Leslie Reed. I go by John L. I was born near Canadaigua, New York, but I grew up in Bristol Valley, which is a small area somewhat west of Canadaigua by about 7-8 miles. And I spent all my childhood there and attended high school in Canadaigua.
Okay. What was your pre-service education?
I think I have to start with, I wanted to go to West Point. Mm-hmm. That was my dream. And so I took the exam for West Point and got a first alternate. But I could not pass the physical because I was too myopic. So I decided to go to Norwich University as an alternative. So mm-hmm. I attended Norwich University from 1945.
So you attended the military
school, yes.
There.
And took ROTC.
Mm-hmm.
And there I was involved in, we were the first cadets to come back after the university went closed during the war. So we essentially were the first starting up the cadet corps again. And I played an active role as a non-commissioned officer, first sergeant for 2 years, and a captain, adjutant of the cadet battalion for a year, for my senior year. Mm-hmm. And I graduated from there with, as a distinguished military student, was offered a commission in the regular army, but because I was under 21, I couldn't take it at that time. Mm-hmm. I had to wait until I was 21, which would be the September following my graduation. So I started college at 16. And that's because I went through a one-room school, and at the end of 6th grade, they didn't know what to do with me, so they gave me all the regents, and I passed them all and went up to 8th grade. Mm-hmm. It's no 7th grade at all, so mm-hmm. That's how I happened to end up there. So I at the end of the period when I became 21, my idea was still to go into the Army as a regular officer.
Excuse me a second, did you have any jobs in between? From graduation until you
Between graduation, well, I looked for a job in 1949, but since I knew I was going in the Army, I didn't look very seriously. I worked part-time while I was waiting for my father, who was opening a new business in Bath, New York. And I worked part-time as a newspaper reporter for the Steuben Courier, which was the Steuben County weekly newspaper. Mm-hmm. And also the man worked out of that office was the county, this was the county seat, and he was the correspondent for the Elmira Star-Gazette, and I worked with him doing photography and interviews. So I did that. And I went to school. They decided that if it didn't work out with the Army, maybe I better have plan B. So my grandfather loaned me some money, and I went to Alfred University and started a master's in education. Mm-hmm. At the end of that time, during that time in that June, the Korean War started. And I assumed that I would probably be called up for active duty almost immediately. So I tried to speed up the process. I had already applied for a mission, and they had turned me down again because of my eye. And they told me to hold it off. And then when the Korean War came, I immediately volunteered for active duty. And I contacted the people in the War Department I've been talking to, and they said, well, we'll make arrangements for you to take a physical again. So I went to Rome to the Air Force Base and took my physical, went back home and didn't hear anything for quite some time. So I couldn't make up my mind to do so. I got a job working in a winery in Hammondsport, Great Western, where I worked in a packing room, packing champagne and wine and so forth. And then eventually they notified me that I was going to be called up for active duty, and during that time they would be working on processing whether or not I would get my regular commission. Mm-hmm. So I was ordered to active duty in March of 1951.
Okay, did you go anywhere else for any kind of additional training, or you?
No, I was sent directly to Louisiana, to Camp Polk, And there I would join the Louisiana National Guard Tank Battalion, which had been ordered to active duty. And I was some of the few ROTC officers being sent in to that unit. So one of them came from Texas A&M. There was another one from one of the Midwestern universities. There were two from Texas A&M, actually. And we were filling in. The tank unit essentially was staffed by people who had very little armor experience. I remember my interview with the colonel of the armored cavalry that was supervising the tank battalions there, an armored cavalry group, who was a Norwich graduate, saying that it's time we got some people in who knew something about tanks. So the colonel commanding that had been a tank commander in the 2nd Armored Division. And he was very interested in the fact that I was a Norwich graduate because he served under Harlan, who later became president of Norwich. And but it was wild because the men had very little training on the tanks. They had very little knowledge. They were constantly sending officers off to armor school, so that we were down short. At one time there were only 2 of us officers in the company to handle it. I was basically doing instruction 8 hours a day, or every day. I was instructing basic gunnery and so forth. And I found that many of the draftees that had been sent in there from the northern Alabama, northern Georgia, were virtually illiterate. They could not read the manuals. We had a great deal of trouble trying to teach them tank gunnery or anything like that. We also had, go ahead.
Did you find any friction with yourself being a northerner, especially from New York State, with southerners?
Essentially, they didn't have much to do with us. Mm-hmm. They all went home every weekend because they lived in the vicinity, close enough to Camp Polk to drive. The non-commissioned officers in my company were very helpful and very good. They were more friendly, but the officers were pretty much aloof. They pretty much kept themselves out. And there were the officers who were in my company. For instance, I never met the company commander of the company until after I had gone to Fort Knox and come back from Fort Knox. And he was off in some training program at Fort Knox, and there was another man who came in. He had no armor experience either. And there were just 2 of us in the company. And then when one of them came back, I went to Fort Knox. So the battalion was constantly turning over people. Mm-hmm. There was very little stability. And we did field training under, I would say, limited circumstances because we simply did not have the personnel to train them to do the kind of gunnery things that they really needed to know. So in the meantime, there's another part of my life is that I was engaged, and I had decided that if I went in the Army, I would not get married. However, the young woman to whom I was engaged wanted to get married. She didn't want to be separated from me, so I got a 5-day delay en route to go home to Connecticut, go back to Connecticut, where my fiance lived. And we got married, and then we drove back to Camp Polk to rejoin the outfit. And at that time, I found myself company commander of a tank company with 1 second lieutenant in it who came from New York, and it had been trained in quartermaster ROTC. And we then immediately went into the field, and every week from Monday through Saturday noontime when we came back into the field, I was in the field during the month of July and August almost. The latter part of June and all of July almost. You want me to?
Well, then when did you end up going to Korea?
Well, this interesting story about this, we were moved from Camp Polk in August. Mm-hmm. They took all the National Guard officers and shipped them out. I ended up as company commander. I had to sign for all the property and the thing the day we left with that stuff on a boxcar. And we were all transferred to Fort Benning, Georgia, to where we became school troops mm-hmm. for the infantry school. And And so when they got there, none of the National Guard officers were left. Now, all the people who were commanding the units that went, no officers went on the train with the men. It was all done by the warrant officers, the NCOs. And I drove over there, taking my wife with me in the car. When we got to Fort Benning, they immediately started bringing in people who had served their tour of duty in Korea. And they were bringing them back to the States. So all these guys were coming back, had been in Korea with the 3rd, some of them from the tank battalion, the tank outfits from the 3rd Infantry, I believe that's what they had the big bug out. Mm-hmm. And some of them were from the 1st Cav. They came back, and all the officers were now Korean guys who had served in Korea. And I was relieved 2 days after I was there, my responsibility as company commander. And there, again, kind of turnover. I was removed from was assigned to headquarters as Assistant S3. And I served as Assistant S3 as liaison with the Armored School, the Infantry School, planning tactical demonstrations and participation in the tanks, which I did for about 2 months. And then they took me from that job and made me an officer and motor officer in A company. I had formerly been in B company, where I stayed for about a month, and then one day the man who was the acting executive officer, a captain, who was serving under a major who was assigned to the battalion, who was acting battalion commander because the regular battalion commander was still on leave. And I was walking through the thing, and he said, "Read, take this and read it." So I held up this citation and I read it, and he said, "Good. I will report up here tomorrow morning. You're adjutant of this battalion, and your first duty is to prepare for a parade in which we're going to award decorations to people who came back from Korea." And I said, "Well, why did you choose me?" He said, "Well, I found out you were at Norwich University and you were adjutant there." He said, "Somebody told you about this, so you must know something about running parades." And he said, "And you can read." So I went up to battalion headquarters, and then after we got the parade over, he said, "Now the next thing you have to do is we have to get all the records in this whole outfit straightened out, because next month we're going to have an inspection by the adjutant general outfit from the post." And so I had to I made arrangements in the post. I ran a clerk training school there. And I was doing that, and then in November I got the notification that I was going to be, I was also sent part-time to CBR Defense School, which was offered on the post. I was also sent to a school to train me as education officer. And then in November, I went to Desert Rock.
Hold that up to
Yeah, I went to Desert Rock, which was an atom bomb test that was held north of Las Vegas, Nevada. And there were, I'd say, about 20 people from Fort Benning that went. We were flown out on a plane.
Okay, got it.
And we landed in Las Vegas, and we had one night there, and then the next day we were taken up to Camp Desert Rock, where we stayed for a couple of days, and then we were taken out to the test site. And about 5 miles from ground zero, we sat down and put our hands up behind our heads like this, and waited until the thing went off, and then after the initial went off, we turned around and looked at it. And saw a huge cloud, grayish black cloud going up in the sky, and then some parts of it sheared off one way and some sheared off the other way. And I guess they were headed for St. George, Utah, in that area. And then they loaded us in trucks and took us up to ground zero, where we walked around and looked where the tower was. Where the tower was, the tower had completely gone. The steel tower was completely gone. All you could see was where the metal had been embedded in the cement.
How close to detonation was that, time-wise? Time-wise, how close to the detonation time was that?
It's probably a little less than about 45 minutes. We were up there within 45 minutes of the time. They kept telling us there was no danger from the radiation. So, we had film badges on here, put on, pinned to our brows. We went up there, we walked around, they had some sheep in the pen, they had some buildings, and so on and so forth. And we looked at the damage to things, and they talked about if there'll be men to survive and the impact, and whether it was safe to go in there. And they had Geiger counters going around showing us how you do test the site and so forth, because I was a CBR defense officer. Okay? So we stayed up there for probably about an hour, and then we were loaded back in the trucks and taken back to the thing where they took all our clothing from us and gave us all new clothing.
Did they have you shower down or anything?
Showered, took showers with, we were in the desert in November. I don't know if you ever, in it, 80 degrees in the daytime and below zero at night. Every morning we were there, you walk out and break the ice on the water to wash with, because the temperature dropped below freezing at night, but in the daytime it was 80. And we cleaned up and washed off our shoes and everything, and then we stayed there another day for a debriefing, and then they put us on a train, a troop train, which was backed into Las Vegas and had to go to Barstow, California to get straightened out and get on the line. And we headed all the way across Nevada, New Mexico, and Texas, and so forth, going back. And then we found out that the train, when we got to Montgomery, Alabama, we found the train was going to go, we would have to go north, all the way into North Carolina, and go to take people back there and then back down to Columbus. So there was a major on there who decided, got everybody together, and we all chipped in and chartered a bus to get home quicker. So then I went back to Fort Benning, and I continued to be adjutant. And then the colonel, who was battalion commander, came in. He was a lieutenant colonel. And so the man who had been acting became major, became acting executive officer. The man who had been my executive officer, acting executive officer, became the adjutant, and I became assistant adjutant. And I still did almost all the adjutant work. And that went on pretty much until, I think it was January. I don't know, I could find out directly by looking in this stuff. I have my own 201 file. Mm-hmm. But I was sent out into the field with a 587th Airborne Regimental Combat Team. And they were running problems, and I was out there as an armor, umpire, and advisor. And I stayed in the field with them for about a week. Every morning, we didn't sleep out there, but every morning we would get up and go out. Another captain and I went out there. The only letters of commendation I ever got in the Army, I got from the commanding officer of the Regimental Combat Team, because I saved some problems from him. These guys were tanks for fooling around, and they almost had some serious problems with people injured with what they were doing. So I stopped the exercise and pulled everybody back and did it over again, and he was very impressed with my initiative and so forth. So I did that, and then I got back. I had not been back more than about a week or two, and I got orders for overseas with a delay en route at the Army General School at Fort Riley, Kansas, where I was going to be trained as a Order of Battle Specialist. And we were told that there was an important shortage of intelligence officers in Korea. But Captain Fisher, who was the man who had been my executive officer and was also adjutant, said, you know, Reed, if you go over there, you're probably you're going to blow your chances in the regular Army. So if you want, we can finagle you to stay here. Oh, by the way, he had also gotten me promoted from a second lieutenant to a first lieutenant within a short period of time after he became my commander. I started working with him. He came out one day with a full file like this, and he threw it on my desk, and he said, now there's some good letters of commendation in there. I want you to go through and pick out the best paragraph and put together a letter and hand it to me, and I'm going to put you up to recommend you for promotion. So I went through and copied out what I thought were the nicest parts and put it in the letter, took it into him, and said, this is great. So he sent it in, and I was promoted to first lieutenant. See, another young man who was in the battalion with me from Texas A&M was also sent to Fort Riley at the same time. Mm-hmm. And almost all of our ROTC officers who were there had been with the unit since we were ordered active duty and joined it in Louisiana, were shipped out. Some of us went to the Army Intelligence School. Others were sent overseas. And one of them was sent to Trieste. When a guy from Texas A&M, he ended up in Trieste. But I went to the Army General School. I moved my wife, who was then pregnant, back to Connecticut and went to Army General School. And that was about in March, I believe, of 1952. And I did that, finished that course, and I came home for about 2 weeks or so, leave, before I then went back to Camp Stoneman. And we were put on an airplane and flown to Japan. We went from Camp Stoneman to Honolulu, where we were not allowed to do anything. We were kept under guard. To Wake, to Tachikawa Airport in Japan. And there was a man who had been at the Army General School with me named Captain Casey. And Captain Casey had been in World War I, or World War II with me. And he started business, so he applied to be exempt, but nothing had happened. But when we arrived in Tokyo, he got off the plane, he went in to sign in. They said, "Don't unpack, Captain, because you're getting on the plane tomorrow morning, you're going back to the United States, you're being separated from the service." They're going home. So we waved goodbye to him. But anyway, we stayed in Tokyo for a couple of days, and then we were put on a train, which went down through Hiroshima, where we had to go out the window and see that, and then to Sasebo, which was a Japanese naval base on the China Sea. And then we took a ship to Busan. And then from Busan, I went to Daegu, which is where this all. And when I arrived in Daegu, they said, "Well, I don't know why they're sending all you guys over here. We don't have any need for you." So they were taking most of the intelligence MOS officers and sending them to a special school to train them as forward observers, both in Piper Cubs and in the trenches. But I was there and waiting for orders, and one day somebody came in and said, "Hey, Reed, they want you up at headquarters." So I went up to headquarters, and they said, "We're looking at your records here. You're from upstate New York, right?" I said, "Yeah, I'm from upstate New York." He said, "Well, we've got the barbershop quartet from Buffalo coming here. They're coming over here to do a tour. They won a national championship, and we want somebody from upstate New York to be their escort officer." So I got orders to go to Special Services and was an escort officer for the Buffalo Bills. And we went across Korea and I did barbershop quartet singing, jump voices, and that happened, took me about a week. Then I came back and I was sitting there and they said, "Well, it looks like you're probably going to end up in a reconnaissance company because that's your MOS." And I said, "Okay, that's fine with me. I had to do something, doesn't over here, you know." And then about 3 days later, he came over and said, "Hey, Reed, you did such a good job at the Buffalo Bills that now they want you to be an escort officer for Eddie Fisher." I said, "What do you mean?" They said, "Well, he's coming over here." Now, this was something, because Eddie Fisher was drafted into the Army, but he was there at the request of President Truman. The Army didn't want any part of him being there. They were I know this because I had a meeting with General I.D. White, who was a Norwich graduate and was commanding the division over there. He called me in for an interview one day because he found out that I was there with Fisher, and somehow or other he knew I was from Norwich. I don't know how he knew. But he told me this. He said, "You know, because we practiced the show one way, but some of the things these guys said and did on stage were not in the show when they practiced it." And I was getting flack about this all the time. I kept talking to these guys, but essentially I had no authority over them. The band was made up of guys who were members of Special Services, and Fisher was there with the presidents under the presidents, and he didn't give a damn about what any of these guys thought anyway. So he said and did what he wanted to do. So anyway, I escorted him to across Korea. He sang almost every day for about 6 days, 6 days there, and then they decided to take the whole show to Tokyo. And so the major, who is his SS liaison officer, said to me, "But you won't be going to Tokyo because somebody else will go with them and probably be me." And I didn't know anything about this, and I went up the next day packing all my stuff, and they come in and said, Reed, you're going to Tokyo. I said, how come? I thought you said, well, he said, well, Eddie Fisher raised the devil because you got started all over, and then you don't get to go to Tokyo with everybody else, so you're going to Tokyo. So I went to Tokyo, where they did the Ernie Pyle Theater. He performed there. And then they went somewhere else, and I flew back to Korea. And I got back in Korea, and I went back to Daegu, and they said, what are you doing back here? I'd say, there apparently was some problems. The problem was that the intelligence people were directly under the G2 of FICOM. And they were tightening up their control over these intelligence people because they wanted to know where they were. And so technically no assignments could be made without that. But anyway, I waited for a couple of days, and a guy came in and he said, go up, sure, you want it up at, orderly came and said, you want it up at headquarters. So I went up to Reed, we don't have paper orders for you right now, but you're going to a reconnaissance company up at Corps. So I packed all my stuff and got in the Jeep and went up this reconnaissance company. I joined them as a platoon leader. We were between the Corps boundary, I think it was the 2nd Division, and on this flank was the Turkish brigade. And we were maintaining liaison with them and watching the night approaches. At that time, the MLR was pretty static. It was before Pork Chop Hill, but it was during that time. And while I was there, I found out where my best friend from college, and the only member of my class to be killed in Korea, was killed. His tank still sat out there in the middle of no man's land. And they got his body back, but he died out there in that thing. And I stayed there in this reconnaissance company. We were mostly what we were doing is liaison and going out at night on patrol, sometimes to get prisoners. But I was very fortunate that I had a good sergeant with me. But again, we had the same problem I had experienced all the way through. It's constant turnover of people coming and going, enlisted men finishing things, non-commissioned officers going out. I had a new commanding officer there, and I was there. Come in a week and a half after I was there. So in a sense, the cohesion of the unit was constantly being disturbed. I read that book, The Band of Brothers, and the thing that impressed me about that is how those guys worked together and fought together for so long that they knew what they were going to do. But none of the units I was in the military during the Korean War ever had that kind of cohesion for the constant changes in personnel, the constant shifting around. So you hardly got to know anybody. And so I stayed there, and I was there for about a month. And one day somebody came down and he said, hey, look, they're looking all over for you, and you're in a lot of trouble. I said, why? He said, well, you get yourself up to headquarters, up to the Corps headquarters right away, and you report to the S1 or G1. So I went up there and he said, Reed, you're not supposed to be here. You're not even supposed to be this unit, you're supposed to be in the, so he said, we got a Jeep going down to Seoul tomorrow, you're going down to the 330 MIS platoon, which is Military Intelligence Specialist platoon, and that's where you're supposed to be. I don't know how you ever got up here. I said, well, they told me the orders were going to be cut and sent. He said, well, we've never seen any orders, and we don't know what you're doing here, but everybody just accepted that thing, and the written note that the major back at the replacement place had given me. So it's all right. You know. So I went back to the MIS platoon, and they gave me a Jeep and a driver, and they said, we have units at all these, the 1st Marines near Incheon, all the way across the peninsula, all American units. We have these units. We have to have everything inventory. And a Korean certificate of loss will have to be made out for everything that's missing. So, and we have to know who these guys are and what they're doing there. So I started over there. I went to every unit that had, every division headquarters, Corps headquarters, all the way across, past Chorwan and that area, trying to find out, making out the Korean certificates of loss, finding out that we had men in the in a hospital, a naval ship that had never been reported back to our headquarters because they were with the Marines and nothing ever got. So I had to go out and visit him and find out what was going on, and so forth. That was an experience in itself because they invited me to. I was there, but they wouldn't let me eat an officer's mess because I did not have weapons. So some bosun's mate took me into their mess to eat because I'm in fatigues and I've been driving all over. All I had was just this bag, and you go to the shower point and throw everything in and get clean clothes. So I did that for it took me a month or so fooling around, traveling back and forth over there, getting reports and going back to Seoul every once in a while. And then I kept trying to find out what they were going to do about the regular Army thing, and I didn't hear anything more about it. And anyway, in late November or so, November, I think it was, they came, somebody called me and they said, you're on active duty for 2 years. I said, well, I thought I was going to be on active duty until they could straight out. I said, well, you're on active duty for 2 years, and President Truman just declared everybody on active duty for 2 years will be separated from the military at the end of their 2 years stint, and your 2 years stint's up. So you're going home. I said, okay, well, about that time I was fed up. I had not heard anything from him all this time, and I figured my wife was living with her mother, and her mother was not well, and there were things, and she was writing me to come home, and she wanted me to come, hoping I would be coming home soon. So I said, this is it, I'm not going to be an officer in the military anymore. So I came home and was separated down in New Jersey from the military. I stayed in the reserves until 1968. In one capacity or another, attending camps and so forth. But then some outfit in Schenectady was supposed to make arrangements for me to go to the armor school so I could get my promotion from captain to major. And I got my trunk packed and shipped it down to Fort Knox, and I waited for the orders, and they never came. I called the War Department, and they said, well, we never received a request. And I called down there, and they said, oh, well, we never bothered. No orders got cut in this department. So I was not going to be able to be promoted or anything, so I resigned my commission, and that was the end of my military experience.
Did you ever have contact with the Turkish troops?
With who?
The Turks.
Yeah.
What did you think of them as a military unit?
I was glad they were on my side. They were tough guys. And first of all, you took everything off that of any value before you went there, because if they admired it, you were supposed to give it to them, and exchange it. They were tough characters. They did not book any monkey business. And the big problem with them is if at one time we were making, part of the division was making a tactical withdrawal. The North Koreans hit. The Turks were charging. Putting bayonets on. But you see, that's the thing. All up and down the line, there'd be patrols today. Nobody bothered them. They didn't have patrols coming at their lines at night because they would lie in wait with their bayonets. They didn't shoot; they just bayonet them. Right? The only other ones who were like them were the Gurkhas. Same thing. If I had to go to where I'd take a battalion of Gurkhas any day against anything else, because those guys were tough.
What did you think of the Republic of Korea troops?
I didn't see much of them. There were Katusas, that's Korean troops in service of the United States Army, who were this. And we had interpreters who were Japanese intelligence officers who were employees of the United States Army, because we had Chinese troops. We take Chinese prisoners. We had no one who could translate. So we were using Japanese officers from intelligence officers to do that. And because there are many dialects in China, and Japanese had people who could speak all those dialects. I was impressed with them. It was interesting because when I was in Seoul, the UN troops were there, and we used to eat in the mess hall occasionally that had all officers from all different units. The ones who amazed me were the Belgians, because some of them were Walloons and some of them were Flemish, and they couldn't get along at all. They were the same country, but they'd argue all the time. And the Dutch. Then also there was Swedish Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, and I didn't know why. The men said, if I get hit, I want to go to that Army Surgical Hospital. So one time I went down there to see a wounded man, and I met the major who was in charge of it, and he invited me in to have some food with him, and then I got to see some of the nurses. I understood why the men wanted to go to that particular hospital.
Okay. What was your reaction to MacArthur's relief? How did you feel about that?
I thought he should have been relieved. I guess maybe because I went to the intelligence school and some of the people there were intelligence officers who served in the South Pacific and with MacArthur. Mm-hmm. They didn't have a very high opinion of his use of intelligence. The other aspect of it was, I think that Ridgway was a far better commander in terms of inspiring the troops. The troops were pretty dispirited. Mm-hmm. And I thought that Ridgway was a much better commander. But I felt the president had the right to remove him. Mm-hmm. And I did not see how, at that time I didn't think much about it, but I don't think dropping nuclear weapons would have done any good.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned here in your paper the form that you filled out, that you thought the Chinese had better equipment than the United States did?
In some cases,
In some cases.
The T-34 tanks were far superior to the M4 A3s. Later they were bringing in the 26s and they were much better. Their mortars were excellent. And also their artillery was very good. And as a matter of fact, one of the things that the intelligence people were very concerned about is their lack of knowledge of where the Chinese artillery was established, was assigned, and how it was organized and everything, because they had an uncanny way of opening up on you at times you didn't expect it. And sometimes that counter battery fire was very effective. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that was something that Americans had not expected. And they had an 80 millimeter mortar or something like that that was very, very effective. They put those things right in your hip pocket. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you join any veterans organizations?
Well, when I lived in Chester, Connecticut, I came out, I taught in elementary school. I was commander of the American Legion post down there for a couple of years.
Have you stayed active, or have you?
No, because I got involved in a whole lot of other stuff, and I didn't have time for that kind of thing. Yeah.
Did you ever stay in contact with anyone that you knew in the service?
No.
Do you think it's because of the churning over?
Turning over. I stayed in contact with Vincent Mandolo, a young man from Texas A&M, for a while, and I lost contact with him. And I never stayed in contact because there was so much turnover and so little opportunity to really develop that kind of friendship.
How do you feel your service affected your life in any way? Do you think it changed your life, or?
Yeah, it did.
In what ways?
Well, it made me decide not to do I gave up an adolescent fantasy of being an officer in the military, that's for sure. And I decided to become a teacher. I thought maybe I should try to do something to work for peace and so forth. And because nothing has left me sadder than the fact that it seems that we accomplished so little over there in terms of getting to the point where we have peace and no more war, and nothing bothers me more now than the thought that more young men are going to go over there or somewhere else and die. I feel very fortunate that I came back. The only thing I have to remind me every day of my service is putting the hearing aids in. That's how I lost my hearing, from the cannons and machine guns.
Mm-hmm. Do you think you had any side effects from going into the nuclear?
Not that any that I know of. Mm-hmm. They sent out information, and I sent in information, and I got information back from them. My film badge did not show any significant level of radiation, and I've never had it. I had 2 children, normally, I'm in fairly good health. Mm-hmm. I've made it through I'll be 74 this month, so I'm doing fairly well.
Stop. And we'll go to another one for. Okay. If you want to show each of those up to the camera.
Okay, this is a picture of me taken.
No, you don't. He'll focus in on it. If you hold it back.
Yeah, otherwise it's too blurry.
I'll leave it up to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Am I holding it right?
Yeah.
This was taken at when I was at Fort Benning, Georgia, and in a park near Fort Benning.
Okay.
I took it to send it home to my mother. And this is a picture which includes part of me and Eddie Fisher.
Pull it back a little bit.
You can see more of Eddie Fisher than me, but this was, when we were there, we were, right now the monsoon season was on then, and it got very wet over there. You said Korea's having serious floods now, but
Yes. So,
for days we were in water
Okay.
every single day. This is another picture of me with another officer. This man is a lieutenant who was liaison officer from Special Services, and he and I were in a hotel room. And when we came back, they didn't fly us back. We came back on this boat, the General Black, which is a troop ship, and it took us 16 days to come across the Pacific from Sasebo to San Francisco, and 14 of the 16 days were stormy.
Okay.
do you have any other?
Do you want to show this thing?
Well, we did that before.
Okay. Would you think they would like to keep this? Or do you have anything?
Oh, that would be great. Put it in your file. I don't think we have anything like that.
Sure, if you want
Yes.
to donate it.
I have no grandchildren, and neither of my daughters are interested. And
Okay.
I'm
One last question. Did you make use of the GI Bill at all?
yes, I did. I used some of the GI Bill eligibility to take a training program for teachers in Connecticut, emergency training program back in the 1950s. And the rest of it I used to get my master's degree at Wesleyan University. And then I went on later and got my doctorate and became a professor at Skidmore.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
No?
Okay, well, thank you very much
Oh,
for
you're
your
welcome.
interview.
Thank you for your military career. And I don't consider myself a hero. Somebody asked me about that at my alma mater, and I said, I did whatever they asked me to do to the best of my ability, no matter how crazy I thought I was. I've never heard anything from Eddie Fisher, but I read a book about it on his life. And he blew it, amazingly.
That's interesting because I had never known that he had gone to Korea to entertain the troops.
Yeah. But he went to the White House and met Truman. And the story in the Army essentially didn't want any part of sending them over there because he was in the Army. But apparently crewmen wanted this young man to go over there, wanted him over there, and wanted him to take troops. So there he was, and that was part of the problem. He didn't have to take anything from anybody essentially. Yeah.
I guess he's still alive, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yes, he wrote a book.
Yeah. I guess he had some problems with alcohol and that,
Or that.
drugs.
No, he was a bad drug addict, real bad. He got involved with some guy who was some kind of wacko guy who was giving these strange drugs and medicines to people. He got involved in that and came to kill himself. Now, he's still living in San Francisco.
Well,
Well, it's an honor to meet you, sir.
yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we'll see you around.
Yes, I'm
the
going to
museum. Yeah. So,
I'm going to take the training and become a ghost, and my hobby is kind of military history. By the way, they're going to have a conference at Skidmore in October. I think the next to the last weekend of October. An Asian Studies Conference. And there's going to be an exhibit. This woman in New Paltz, who's a Chinese American, and her husband are doing paintings of the 36 strategies that were developed by the Chinese generals to defeat the enemy. And she's illustrating each one of the 36 strategies. And she's going to be at a panel. There's going to be a panel on these paintings. And an exhibit of some of them, not all 36 of them, but some of them, at the Tong Museum.
that would be interesting to attend.
If you want, I'll get you a copy because my spouse, who's supposed to be on sabbatical, is working, getting up the program, so she's on the program thing. So give me your card, or
Yes.
whatever, and I'll make sure that you get a copy of the agenda.
Okay, great. Yes, I'd love to.
All right.
Thank you. Yeah.
And the other thing is, I don't know if you noticed now, but Norwich University has a what's called a cold